Welcome back to episode 14. Today, we're going to talk about the misinformation in AI. I think people have a lot of fear about this. This weekend, I watched a 60 Minutes episode where Jeffrey Hinton was on it, and he raised some alarming concerns about AI and its capabilities and the ability that could become more intelligent than people and cause harm in certain use cases like autonomous weapon systems and misinformation using AI to generate misinformation in social media and politics. And so I think it's important that we continue to do stories like that. I mean, Jeffrey Hinton, brilliant guy, founder of deep learning and one of the early pioneers in neural networks. When he speaks and raises alarm bells, I think a lot of concerns go off in a lot of people's mind. We have a lot of sound bites out there about AI, and I think a lot of the talk has been about the shiny, exciting use cases of AI, like drug discovery or, making harmful drugs using AI to do negative things. So, building poisons with drug discovery based AI. There's a Netflix episode that I think I talked about in the past where AI was used to create toxins that were harmful to people simply by negative actors applying AI in the opposite way than most of us are trying to apply it. So stories like that don't help. And I think we really need to have less talk about the hype of the technology and saying the technology could do this, but more in-depth pieces, I think, is what's needed by the media. I think we are in such a soundbite world and 30-second sound bites. For example, Daisy's tried to implement AI probably 20, 30 times in companies in terms of this problem space we're solving. And there's a lot of learnings and practical reality in the application of AI and automation that I think should be talked about and discovered and would help allay some of the fears and concerns and could help the regulators come up with practical solutions on how to regulate AI. So I think we need to stop with the hype, do more in-depth pieces, write articles, case studies about practical reality, real applications that have made it all the way to the goal line and applied in the real world setting with real world results and applications as opposed to continued talk about potential. So I think we need to move from potential of AI, potential for good and potential from harm. I think those shallow conversations are what cause fear because not enough information is given to properly assess the claims, looking for more and more use cases where there's real practical outcomes and results. And I'm sure we'll find a lot of examples where the AI has not delivered as promised. I know Daisy has not succeeded everywhere where we've tried to apply AI due to the change management challenges. I think it's partly the technology. There's practical limitations to the real world, how the real world can execute. So building AI technology and AI can make a recommendation that cannot be executed in the real world due to practical limitations. Like, for example, in retail, we can make a custom flyer for every single consumer. So be one-to-one, perfect one-to-one decision for every customer. But does a retailer have the ability to execute that? Or can we have a unique assortment plan in every store? So every single store would have a unique set of products, maybe with a unique set of prices. Again, that's the holy grail of retail, is trying to get to one to treat each of its customers uniquely. But the practical reality today is that retailers are unable to execute to that level. So they may have regional assortments or certain assortment plans for certain store formats. So again, that's an example of a practical limitation that would limit the AI's ability to do this one-to-one. Yet the people who invent the technology like us, we would talk, yes, we can do one-to-one marketing down to one person and give them customized shopping lists and customized assortments to store. So we talk about a capability, not about the practical reality. So I think if we talked a lot more about practical reality and did a lot more news shows like 60 Minutes, where they have a longer format, where it's not a 30-second soundbite, I think then we can share more broadly information about the reality of AI and what its true capabilities are, and talk about the journey of implementation, how long it takes. How Daisy's been talking about building trust with people is really what you need to implement AI. If the human beings who are using AI today, or if it's stepping on their toes, you have to engage them and have them trust the system, trust that it works, trust that it's not going to harm the company, trust that it's not going to harm the people in the company. Harm from a company perspective would be negative revenue or people losing their jobs, things like that. So I think building trust is a key element, and talk about practical examples of how we build trust. In the case of retail, we build trust by analyzing historical information and applying the AI backwards in time to say, if the Daisy AI system had been around a year ago, what would the difference have been? What are the different decisions that the AI would have made than the retailer made? So we can look at historical promotions and say, last year, here's an example of a promotion that we could have optimized. You promoted this set of 100 items. Daisy would have recommended a different set of 100. Maybe 50 of them overlap, but there was 50 differences. And we could explain, here's the differences. The differences are due to these reasons. This item we're recommending, like ground beef, has a very large halo, much larger than the other meat product halo. Last year, you promoted steak. Steak has less of a halo than ground beef. Ground beef has higher penetration. It occurs more customers buy ground beef than buy steak. So a ground beef buyer will likely buy steak. A steak buyer may not necessarily buy ground beef, maybe two different consumers. So that's an explanation. So explaining the differences between what AI does and what the people do today, that explanation starts to build trust, and it's a low risk way. And I think in all the use cases, the technology people should focus on that to say, here's what AI would have done differently in a low risk way, again, to build trust with the users looking backwards. And I think that's the first step in building trust and maybe explaining what the AI do. So even for new entrants to market, new AI technology companies, look for those case studies and share those stories. How are you building trust? And having the media take interest in writing slightly longer pieces. It's hard in a 400-word blog or a 30-second soundbite on a Twitter feed to get across some of these case studies. And perhaps I think there's a great idea for another blog that maybe I'll walk you through next time, a very detailed case study with slides about how we implemented AI and what were the challenges. I can go through a successful case study and an unsuccessful case study to give you the practical reality that in these cases, although our AI is autonomous and can do what people can't do and can automate a process, there's also a real practical challenge that did we eliminate people? No, we didn't eliminate jobs. So some of this fear is maybe exaggerated. That's my 2 cents on what needs to be done to tone down the media rhetoric. Let's get more practical. Let all us AI practitioners out there come forward with more practical, real story. And it's okay to talk about failures, talk about successes balanced with failures, because that gives you a reality and gives a reality check to the general population. I know when I've spoken at conferences, a lot of folks have expressed concern and fear about the future with AI, and rightly so. There is a concern and a fear, but there's also a practical reality through these case studies. What can we do to govern AI? What can we learn? And especially for the regulators, should really be investigating a lot of the case studies where AI has been applied in a practical setting and generated outcomes, good or bad, that the regulators can learn from those and come up with ideas for regulation. So we've joined a chamber of commerce that talks about AI and is writing position papers on AI and maybe helping regulators. And so we certainly like to contribute to that conversation and share all the experiences we have, good, bad, indifferent, ugly, to help come up with the new regulations and help control this AI that's out there, as well as tell these stories to allay some of the fears and concerns that the general population has. So that's my 2 cents today, a little shorter talk on what we can do to combat misinformation. And as always, if you have concerns and fears about AI, I'd be always more than happy to have a chat about that or do a Q&A session for a podcast. What are your biggest questions or concerns about AI? And I'd love to take a shot at answering them. Not that I know everything, but certainly having worked in this industry, can share my viewpoints, maybe allay some fears or concerns. So as always, don't hesitate to give that feedback, ask those questions. Please subscribe to Spotify or our YouTube podcast links, and look forward to sharing with you again soon. Thanks so much.